For years, the world only glimpsed a charming young prince, a bright-eyed boy whose smile seemed to light up every room he entered. Yet behind the palace gates, a deep and haunting silence pervaded, the kind of quiet that makes even servants glance nervously over their shoulders. Whispers slipped through corridors at midnight. Nannies left quietly, one after another, as if fleeing an invisible storm. And now, barely a minute ago, the carefully cultivated image of perfection, of innocence and joy, has been shattered. A palace psychologist stepped forward with revelations so unsettling, so destructive, that they could reshape the future of the monarchy itself. What has been hidden all this time, cloaked beneath ceremony and gilded walls? Why did no one speak up sooner? Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell for every twist in this unfolding story. At first glance, Prince Louis seemed like the very picture of youthful charm. A boy who knew instinctively how to smile at photographers, tug playfully at his mother's clothing, and wave to crowds as if he were born for the spotlight. But appearances, as insiders warn, can be dangerously deceptive. While the public swooned over his antics, courtiers spoke in hushed tones, exchanging anxious glances over moments that didn't fit the scripted perfection. Close aides began leaving quietly, citing personal reasons, yet their faces told a far more unsettling story. Fear, unease, and a palpable sense of being haunted. Former nannies, speaking on condition of anonymity, have revealed nights when Louis would weep inconsolably, hours stretching endlessly as no comfort seemed to reach him. He wasn't throwing tantrums, one whispered, her voice shaking with the weight of memory. He seemed absorbed in his own thoughts, lost in a world only he could navigate. These warnings, however, were ignored and buried beneath layers of denial, strict protocol, and bureaucracy. She was not alone in noticing the troubling signs. Insiders began pointing out that Louis frequently and inexplicably missed important royal appearances. A stark contrast to his older siblings, George and Charlotte, whose attendance was precise, rehearsed, and flawlessly coordinated. When Louis did appear in public, handlers hovered unnaturally close, constantly redirecting him, talking him through gestures, and routing his path as though shielding the world from a truth no one was ready to face. What exactly were they trying to hide? Behavioural specialists have since become fixated on footage from recent high-profile events, especially the Jubilee. Every blink, every tiny flinch, every abrupt gesture has been examined with painstaking attention. Experts have noted Louis's total emotional disengagement during thunderous applause, followed by sudden, startling bursts of seemingly practiced laughter. A behaviour far beyond ordinary child idiosyncrasies. It is not just unusual, it is alarming. Could it signal attempts to conceal inner turmoil, result of overwhelming emotional stimulation, or perhaps both? Even more troubling is the silence that enveloped the media. Televised broadcasts of his appearances conveniently omitted his moments entirely. Paparazzi images, which would usually be relentless in their hunt for royal children, were mysteriously absent. Reporters now attest that royal liaison subtly yet firmly advised them not to report anything that might reveal Louis's emotional state, a quiet gag order disguised as public relations strategy. Behind the scenes, the royal family sought out the help of an independent specialist, someone who could observe Louis without the intrusive gaze of the press. Enter Dr. K, a psychologist with a long-standing reputation for managing high-profile child cases in absolute privacy. Publicly, she was presented as an educational consultant, a subtle presence designed to reassure rather than alarm. But insiders say her true purpose was far more serious: to observe, to diagnose, and to uncover what the palace itself had overlooked, or perhaps deliberately ignored. Dr. K studied Louis for weeks, meticulously observing not only his public demeanour, but also his private habits, anxieties, and familial interactions. What she found shook her to the core. Louis was not ill, but unprotected in a system where appearance had long been placed above intervention. The palace may have hoped her presence would create calm and preserve the illusion of order, but Dr. K's mission was not to soothe appearances. It was to speak the truth. And the truth she discovered was horrifying. Every smile Louis offered was carefully constructed, every wave rehearsed to perfection. Experts in body language now suggest the signs were always there: hands fidgeting nervously, eyes darting at empty hallways, subtle gestures unnoticed by the public. From the moment Louis entered the spotlight at Wimbledon, every public movement was planned. Observers noted him writhing, hiding his ears, staring off into space, while George and Charlotte followed instructions flawlessly. At the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, the public dismissed these behaviours as childish mischief. But those closest to him knew better. These were silent pleas for assistance, cries that went unheard. Louis's presence on stage was a study in contrasts. Sometimes he was eerily still, sometimes inexplicably hyperactive. Charlotte curtsied with grace. George stood alert and confident. Louis seemed adrift, alienated, caught between the world he was required to perform in and the one he could not navigate. Later, palace sources admitted long-standing concerns over his reactions to sudden lights, loud noises, and chaotic crowds. Rehearsals often left him frozen, overwhelmed, or in distress. Rumours circulated that he would only agree to participate in certain events if specific comfort measures were in place. Though never intended for public ears, some moments almost slipped through the cracks. Hot mic recordings captured tense backstage exchanges. "Just keep him smiling," one handler instructed. "Take him off the stage. If he stares again, this cannot continue," said another. These warnings were never broadcast. Feeds were cut. Video vanished. Yet the tension within the palace continued to mount. Even royal press staff began to feel the pressure, torn between safeguarding the monarchy's image and protecting the child. A silent revolt was brewing within the palace walls. Some reporters pushed harder, attempting to uncover the truth. Staff raised concerns, advocating for longer breaks, fewer appearances, and specialized support. Yet the palace's devotion to maintaining a flawless image drowned out all appeals. Vulnerability was not tolerated. It was treated as a problem to be concealed. Handlers attempted real-time control of Louis, employing subtle yet deliberate tactics, nudging his hands into waves, tapping his shoulder, whispering instructions mid-performance. These gestures were not gentle reminders. They were precise, orchestrated maneuvers designed to mask an escalating problem. Louis remained trapped, performing for the world, unseen and unheard, imprisoned in a golden cage of expectation and protocol. Then one voice broke through the decorum. Dr. K, the palace psychologist entrusted with his care, performed the unimaginable. Known for handling some of the most complicated childhood trauma cases in high-profile families worldwide, she stepped forward and spoke publicly, revealing a system built on denial, secrecy, and emotional deprivation. She was no ordinary advisor, bound by strict confidentiality and royal security clearance. She had entered the palace as a lifeline, not a critic. Yet the evidence of suffering compelled her to act. In private sessions, Louis spoke softly, almost as if he were drowning in words he could barely breathe. "Why do I have to smile when I'm scared?" he asked during one meeting. A question that left Dr. K deeply unsettled. He described feeling confined by noisy spaces, perplexed as to why he had to appear before cameras, uncertain which moments were real and which were performance. "They only see me when I'm happy," he said, a devastating glimpse of a child's invisibility. These were not tantrums. They were early indicators of profound emotional distress. Dr. K repeatedly urged senior palace officials to limit Louis's public appearances, emphasizing that he needed expert clinical support, not more rehearsals, photo ops, or briefings. Each time her warnings were deflected, officials insisted the public must see a joyful, united front. Yet everyone inside knew the truth. Louis was not okay. Over the following weeks, Dr. K's sessions with Prince Louis escalated in intensity, peeling back layers of behaviour that had long been hidden behind palace walls. What was once a vivacious, intermittently playful child began to retreat into moments of profound silence. The spark that had charmed photographers and captivated the public slowly dimmed. Observers noted that he would avert his gaze, searching desperately for spaces where he could breathe freely, where the cameras, flashes, and crowds could not reach him. "I want to go somewhere quiet, but there's always a camera," he allegedly whispered during one session. A simple plea that carried a weight far beyond his years. That moment marked a turning point for Dr. K. She realized she could no longer remain complicit in the palace's orchestrated performance of perfection. The palace, as expected, assumed her resignation would pass silently. They believed she would step away quietly, submit her reports, and allow the institution to continue as though nothing had changed. But the reality was far different. Within hours, a copy of Dr. K's final internal report had surfaced within a global network of child mental health professionals. Experts quickly recognized it as a call for institutional accountability, not as a weapon to embarrass the royal family, not as fodder for tabloids, but as a protective intervention for a child who had been quietly suffering. The report laid bare patterns of systemic neglect, emotional mismanagement, and a relentless prioritization of public appearance over the psychological well-being of a young prince. Dr. K's actions were not retaliatory, they were protective, driven by a profound sense of responsibility to a child who had been invisible in plain sight. Yet the consequences of her decision were immediate and explosive. For the first time in decades, a royal scandal emerged that had nothing to do with money, affairs, or political maneuvering. It was a scandal that concerned something infinitely more delicate, the emotional and psychological health of the youngest heir, muted by duty, bound by protocol, and trapped in an environment that demanded perfection at all costs. What exactly did the report reveal, and why did it trigger a near-total lockdown of Kensington Palace? Though the language of the report was clinical and meticulously crafted, the implications were devastating. Prince Louis, once portrayed as the cheeky, carefree child adored by the public, was living with a neurological, emotional condition so rare and complex that even seasoned pediatric specialists were astonished. While unnamed in the report for privacy reasons, it described a constellation of symptoms: recurrent social disengagement, extreme sensitivity to stimuli, and intense emotional responses that could manifest suddenly and unpredictably. Put simply, Louis struggled to process the relentless demands of royal life. He was bright, articulate, and academically gifted. Yet the pressures of expectation, flashes, cheering crowds, the constant gaze of the public could push him to emotional extremes. One moment he could appear calm and composed. The next, he could experience complete shutdown or overwhelming distress. Every public appearance functioned as both a performance and a psychological test, placing him under sustained emotional strain. Dr. K's evaluation was thorough and careful. Louis had extraordinary resilience, but his condition required structured, calm, and supportive environments, as well as sustained emotional attention. Conditions at odds with the rigid and highly public framework of royal life. The report emphasized that public appearances acted as accelerants, intensifying his symptoms and creating cycles of stress and emotional fatigue. On page 14, Dr. K issued a line that has echoed through palace corridors like a dire warning. If left unrest, these patterns could escalate into a profound identity crisis, one with the potential to affect the very foundations of succession and constitutional continuity. This was not a casual recommendation. It was a red alert for an institution founded on perceived stability, ancestral lineage, and the projection of unshakable strength. The monarchy relies on the appearance of poise and control. Every gesture, every public action, every comportment is scrutinized as evidence of continuity. If the youngest heir, once seen as delightfully unpredictable, was quietly struggling, what did that imply for the future of the monarchy? Could an ancient system, built on appearances, accommodate vulnerability? Could compassion prevail over optics? Opportunity was there, yet the palace did not seize it. Instead, they chose power over empathy. Their response was calculated, methodical, and designed to conceal the truth, far more chilling than the diagnosis itself. Despite the report's confidentiality, a reality began to emerge, carefully manipulated for public consumption. Leaked emails, strategic media blackouts, and meticulously curated photographs revealed a palace determined to rewrite the narrative with unflinching precision. Within hours, Kensington Palace initiated a coordinated campaign of controlled visibility. Prince Louis suddenly appeared everywhere, holding Catherine's hand during family walks, smiling in supposedly candid photos, laughing in staged moments in the palace gardens. On the surface, it was the playful child the public had always adored, but insiders confirmed that these scenes were far from spontaneous. Each photo, each frame, had been orchestrated with precision. Press photographers operated under strict non-disclosure agreements, ensuring that every image served the palace's agenda. Every smile, every glance, every gesture was calculated to obscure the underlying reality. The timing of this sudden visibility was deliberate. Sources indicate it was part of a broader strategy to manage a crisis quietly. Some tabloid insiders speculate that a blackout pact existed behind the scenes, with palace officials negotiating with major media outlets to suppress any discussion of Louis's condition. In return, editors reportedly received early access to non-sensitive royal news, a bargain that ensured the story of the young prince's struggle remained buried beneath a veneer of charm, laughter, and whimsical innocence. Within days, the internet was flooded with light-hearted images and stories of royal mischief, portraying Louis as the cheeky, energetic, lovable prince. Headlines highlighted his funny faces and playful antics, deflecting attention from the serious psychological strain he endured. The public narrative was crafted to distract, to entertain, and to normalize a facade that hid an intensely private and painful reality. But the stakes were far higher than public perception. If even a fraction of Dr. K's findings are accurate, this story is not just about a child facing extraordinary pressures. It is about an ancient institution systematically prioritizing image over care. The key question is no longer what is happening to Prince Louis in isolation. The deeper concern is how far the palace is willing to go to protect that image, even at the cost of a child's well-being. How far will tradition, protocol, and the projection of power dictate silence and suppression? Can the monarchy evolve, or will it continue to prioritize perception above empathy? One certainty remains: this story is far from over. The layers of secrecy, the carefully curated narratives, and the silent struggle of Prince Louis are all still unfolding. And as the palace navigates this unprecedented revelation, one thing is clear: the next developments could redefine everything the public thinks it knows about the royal family. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, because what comes next may change the perception of the monarchy forever.